And this land that we're on has long sustained Indigenous peoples and cultures, yet the majority of homeless people on this land are Indigenous. And the roots of this tragic reality lie in historic and ongoing colonization. And it's time to decolonize and share this land and its resources as the treaties intended. So let's keep these thoughts in our minds as we listen and reflect on the words of our speakers this evening. So we are going to show you the agenda for the event, so you have an idea of what's going to be happening over the next hour. I think that's going to pop up on your screen, hopefully. But in the meantime, while you take a look at that, I'm going to run through some quick tech details. So we are recording the speakers' videos and the audio for this event. Your microphones are all muted to maximize the quality of the sound. You are welcome to keep your video on, or you can turn it off. It's really great to see faces though. The speakers are going to be spotlighted, so if you don't have an updated version of Zoom, you'll have the best experience if you just set your view to speaker view. We're going to have the chat closed in order to focus the discussion on what the speakers are saying, but we do invite people to share comments or questions directly in the chat with the people that are going to be labeled as host. So these messages are going to go directly to the hosts, and we're hoping to share some of those comments, questions throughout the event. We also can use those questions to help us plan future events or learning. And then just lastly, that this event is striving to be a safer space, so any disruptive or harmful behavior on video is not going to be tolerated. All right, so we have a number of speakers ready to share with us this evening. And I'm going to start by first turning it over to Elder Charlotte Nolan, who we are very grateful to have here with us tonight to start things off in a good way. And she is going to be joined by Betty Adele from End Homelessness Winnipeg. And together they will give us a better sense of who is experiencing homelessness in our communities. And they're really going to expose some of the root causes of their homelessness.
Okay. Ante, bonjour. Hainista, Nipawis, Capscalki, who is Square, Equa, Nicosum is the Tim and Pimpat, Equa, Charlotte, Kihuni Dodem. I introduced myself in the 3 spirit names that I walk with. The first one that was given to me was Charlotte back in 1972 at the Limney Ridge Park, 2 o'clock in the morning. I was given the name of Charlotte. And the second name is Red Horse Running. I was given this after I finished my first fast up in Cowichan Lake in BC. And it's a warrior's name. The third name that I walk with is Stand Strong Eagle Woman. This was given to me after I transitioned in 2017 and began walking as myself as Charlotte. Today I was offered tobacco, Samak. That's the agreement. When we accept tobacco, we're entering into an agreement between ourselves and the person who offers the tobacco, but also with Creator and the old ones, the ancestors, those who have come before us, in that the words that we're going to speak and share with people are words that come from the Spirit. They don't come from the mind, they come from the Spirit. And so I'll share a prayer with you. And I ask everyone to pray in their own way, their own language, as they understand it. We have many different languages across this beautiful nation, and we need to honor and respect all of those languages. Mount Taima, Kisema ito, Kanaskumton, Mount Taima, Kanaskumton, Kignawaski, Naskumton, Welcome now. Muslim now. Kinaskamtin, ni Weeman Agan, Square in the Tituan. Kinaskamtin, ni Wasawa. Asne Posquamasus, Equa, Wapis, Geos, Brea. Kinaskamtin. Mount Time. Creator, grandmothers and grandfathers. I humbly am here before you and asking for your blessings, Creator. I give thanks for the gift of life on this day and the blessings of all my relatives from the four sacred directions. I give thanks for Kikanowski, Grandmother Earth, who feeds us and provides us with medicines, provides us with our relatives, the four-legged, the winged ones, those that swim and those that crawl. Our relatives, Asne, our relatives, Mitik. We give thanks for these things, Creator, and we ask you to come into our spirit this evening. Sit with us and let us each understand what it is we're trying to share with the world, people of this nation here. I ask you, Creator, grandmothers and grandfathers, bless all my relatives who are homeless at this time. Be with them and keep them safe, Creator, and help them and help us to provide homes for them. If I've forgotten anything, Creator, please accept them in my silent prayers. Itakwese, ekose, I miigwich. Oh, so tonight Betty and I are going to talk about systemic and other concerns, the who and the why of homelessness. We look at the sort of agenda that we have, that there's different reasons why people are homeless, and being homeless, I'd just like to share that unless a person has been homeless, they won't understand it. It's like being a parent. Unless you've been a parent, you can't understand what it's like to be a parent. I used to teach parenting classes, and I didn't understand what it was like to be a single parent until I became one. And it's the same with homelessness. I've been there. I've been at the brunt and of some of the reasons why people are homeless. People from the justice system who are released into homelessness, they're, dropped off in the city, the institutions. Youth involved in the child welfare system. It has been shown that research that 50% plus of the people experiencing homelessness in their adulthood first started to experience homelessness as a youth, with the majority being involved in the child welfare system. And I can attest to that. I spent the first 19 years of my life as a ward of the government. And when I left the child welfare system, I was homeless. I was on the streets. And so I fully understand why our young people are ending there, because you're not given any tools to come out of there with. I've worked in social services now for the last 30 plus years, and yeah, we need to do some work. As human beings, we need to do some work. People that are released from hospitals to homelessness. Wow. They come out of hospital and they're told to leave the hospital, and it's worse all the time. Like, I don't know if any of you have been to the emergency wards at the hospitals, and they have security guards there, and where did humanity forget to be humanity? some of our relatives don't have secure finances. They cut off support, no money for damage deposit. And having worked in social services for the last 30 years, I know that for a fact that if somebody is evicted from their unit, as soon as they're evicted from their unit, they're homeless. And welfare will give you the basic 100 and something to live on for that month. No money for a damage deposit, no money for rent because you don't have a place. And to get a place is difficult. The average cost of a bachelor apartment in Winnipeg is $757 right now. After paying rent, this leaves people on social assistance with a whole $14 to cover the rest of their monthly expenses. And even just a room in these rooming houses also $600 a month for a room that's filled with cockroaches and bed bugs and whatnot, and everything. And how can they afford that? Not enough housing that people experiencing homelessness can afford to move into. There are thousands of households on the wait list for social RGIs, rent geared to income housing, the most affordable housing available to people with low incomes. It really astounds me that here we are in 2021. We've been discussing homelessness for how many years? 10, 15, 20 years. And we're here again, and we're trying to make strides forward. We have to raise our united voices to our governments and let them understand that, poverty, it shouldn't be in this day and age. Canada is a very rich country, and yet we have people that freeze to death in our cities. I don't know how many we lost this winter of the homeless population, but one was too many. One was too many. So I hope that people tonight that are listening in here will open their spirit, their heart, and say, I want to connect my voice to the rest of you so that we can have an impact on our governments, our politicians, and make them accountable to humanity. That's what they were elected for, to be accountable to the people. Because when they told us about democracy, democracy was for the people, by the people. We need to return to that. We need to let our politicians know that it's not acceptable to lose even one, freezing to death. Could have been any of our relatives. And the reality is we're all one step away of being homeless. That's the reality of things, So I'm going to pass it over to my co-chair, Betty, and let her explain the rest of the who's and whys of homelessness. Igwich, hi, Kinaskamtan.
Thank you, Charlotte. So my name is Betty Edel. I'm the Director of Housing Supports at End Homelessness Winnipeg. I too grew up homelessness. I was part of the Children's Aid Society, it was called back then. And I think it's important that we, Charlotte and I, acknowledge that we were part of the system and that we grew up homeless. I think it's important because I think people have an idea of people who are homeless, who have experienced homeless and what happens. So there is hope. Like, we are people with different knowledge and gifts and wisdom and experiences. So I think we need to get to the humanity, because sometimes we just call, that's a homeless person. no, that person's an auntie and uncle, a grandpa and grandma, a brother or sister. So I think we need to really focus on the humanity of people and not the labeling of people. So I have a list. Really, we alphabeticalized this. I think we're up to O or P already in the list of, you know, why and that. But I think the biggest thing that people need to recognize is that really homelessness can happen to any of us. I've been working in the social justice field for 38, 39 years, for a long, long time. And what I've noticed is that any of us, if we don't have the proper supports in our lives, if we don't have informal supports like our family members or our friends, and if we don't have the formal supports, if for whatever reason there's long waiting lists and we can't access those supports, that's what contributes to homelessness, because sometimes people get housed, but they're walking into it if dependency has been created in a shelter because they haven't had to cook their meals or make their beds in that, and then we just say to people, well, here's a house, right? But we need to really honor that part of unpackaging all that is that there is a journey to becoming independent and interdependent. So we all know that we're part of a community. Another aspect of homelessness that is very real, and I just heard a story about this today, was that we have discrimination. There is racism and discrimination in our city. And a lot of times when people phone to go look at a place, and then and a place is available, and when they show up, it may not necessarily be available anymore. So I think we need to acknowledge that, because that ties into the options and the choices for housing. If, you know, so that will come in the solutions, but I really want people to truly understand that when we hear about discrimination and racism, that is very real to people. Sometimes people experience being homeless because they come down here because there's a flood or a fire. And then everyone got to go back home and maybe they missed something. And so now they're having a hard time getting home. Sometimes people come down here for medical reasons and get stuck down here in the city and become homeless. A lot of times people come down here from their home communities because there's not enough housing built for them. So they think coming to Winnipeg, they'll have more options and they can have a better life. But again, they can come down, but the housing costs are unaffordable to people on lower or fixed income. Simple things that I consider myself a person of privilege. I have a job, I have my home. I can, if I don't have ID, I have money to pay for it. I have a mailbox where it can be dropped off. But if you're living on the streets and you're constantly in survival mode and you don't have access to money, then you need to pay. You need money to pay for ID. And the strange thing about ID is you need ID to get ID. So people keep on this spinning around of trying to get out of this, right? A lot of times people become homeless, sometimes because of eviction. There has been many instances of gangs taking over people's units and people being too afraid to say anything, and then they get evicted. And the importance of that eviction is then they don't have a reference for the next place. So if you don't have references, it's hard to get a place. Having no ID, again, that's a big thing. And credit checks. What happens to some people is if they live with some people because they're experiencing being homeless, and the cost of that could be, well, can you get us a phone? Or can you put cable in for us? And then people don't pay for that. Then it's the people whose name that's in, they are going to get a not good credit check, which will prevent them from being able to get some housing. So even though we've said these things, I mean, there are many, many, many more reasons of why people experience being homeless, but we just wanted to give you a taste of things that maybe to us are simple, those of us who have a home and have money to purchase stuff. But yeah, if you're in a hard place and if you want to live somewhere and someone says, yeah, you can stay here if you pay for my cable, but then they don't pay for it, then that will impact you for years if you don't have money to pay for that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Betty and Charlotte, for all of that, and especially for sharing with us your own experiences and your wisdom. You know, we know that when we're thinking about who it is that is experiencing homelessness in our communities, that a large percentage, I think the last number from our street census showed that 70% of those that are experiencing homelessness are Indigenous. And we know that Indigenous people only make up 10% of Winnipeg's population. And so that's kind of a striking statistic, I think. And Indigenous people, we know, do not have access to many resources and opportunities, often because of the historic and ongoing colonization and racism that they experience. And so if we want to end homelessness, we must work to decolonize and end racism. And so thank you for touching on that. And I also think that when we're talking about root causes, we cannot overemphasize the points that you're making around the impact of the lack of affordable housing options. I mean, it's maybe obvious, but we can't end homelessness without housing. There are so many other pieces to that puzzle. You've just started scratching the surface of that here. But we know that, you know, we won't do much good if we can connect people with IDs and the documentation they need to apply for housing and with the supports that they need to maintain their tenancies, if the housing isn't there, if the affordable housing isn't there for them to move into. So thank you so much for all of that. I think we're going to turn it over now to Adrian Dudick and Jacob Kaufman from the Main Street Project. They are going to give us a sense of some of the local emergency responses that have been put in place here to support people that are experiencing homelessness. They're also going to share some of what they've learned about homelessness from the perspectives of people who are directly experiencing it.
Hi, hello, and good evening. My name is Adrian Dudick. I'm the Director of Housing with the Main Street Project. I acknowledge that I'm fortunate enough to live and work on the Treaty 1 territory, and I approach my work with humility in hopes of contributing to an agenda of reconciliation. I am also so thankful to be able to be guided by leaders in the community like Charlotte and Betty, who have the patience to teach us and who we learn from. Winnipeg is experiencing an escalating housing emergency. Temporary encampments and unsheltered homelessness are the most visible symptoms of this crisis. Hundreds of people in our city daily face this reality, and it places them at an increased risk of violence, exploitation, and then these harms are further worsened by ongoing systemic injustices. The COVID-19 pandemic and extreme weather in Manitoba over the course especially of the past few months has resulted in the closing of many services that people relied on just to meet their daily needs. It's important to note that in the city, there's both formal and informal networks of people doing outreach. Both are impactful and both are a form of community response. The Winnipeg Outreach Network laid the groundwork for coordination among outreach service agency groups in Winnipeg. It's described as a network of outreach workers working together to reach out to anybody who's street involved. The mandate is to provide information, resources to youth and adults, coordinate efforts, network between agency, and promote safety for outreach workers by sharing information about streets and neighborhoods, and also look at providing training opportunities. Most of the agencies included in this network have the ability to provide peer support, which is invaluable, as well as case management to the people that they encounter. Another really important item to note is that many of these agencies share an information database known as HIFIS, which can connect to each other and also the shelters in Winnipeg. In 2019, a second forum was created specifically to look at calls to action and a coordinated response to unsheltered Winnipeggers called the Kikanaoma strategy. It was a name gifted by Indigenous elders to mean, this is our home here. With the support of End Homelessness, and over the past several years, this group has engaged with first responders, City of Winnipeg officials such as the Winnipeg Fire and Paramedic Service, the Parks Department, Community Development, city councilors, the Winnipeg Police Service, and multiple frontline community agencies, and especially and most importantly, people with lived experience of homelessness, to all work collaboratively on interim responses and longer-term strategies to connect individuals who are living unsheltered in the community with their own self-determined supports. Unlike anywhere else in the country, this model implements a community response through 311 calls to dispatch Main Street Project and other community groups as the first line of response for well-being checks and/or case management supports for those living in encampments, outside, and more recently in bus shacks. Because we respond does not mean they move, nor is it the job of outreach workers, city services, and police to move people. Shelters play a pivotal role in emergency services, but shelters are not the answer to homelessness. Many people choose not to access overnight sleep services due to previous experiences, barriers for access, dynamics of relationships, and many other valid understandings. The outreach component of the Kikanaoma strategy is a tool and approach to build trust and relationships with people. The people we encounter in the community each day are the architects of their own decisions, much like you and I. Kikanaoma has adopted the rights-based approach informed by the National Protocol on Homelessness Encampments in Canada. That protocol shapes all action, communication strategies, and decisions that are made. Interim responses and public awareness are absolutely the key in shifting the model away from the stigma around homelessness, and the recommendations by this committee recognize that a tri-level approach from government is needed to address housing for people of all types. It's also important to note that although service agencies like Main Street Project and other people participating at these tables are building relationships through long-term outreach, more than ever over the past year, there has been a mobilization of community groups and caring individuals who through informal networks have also attended to the needs of people living unsheltered. Many of these people have provided meals, blankets, a kind word, and even temporary housing for over the course of the coldest nights. One of the pivotal next steps will be to bring both the informal and formal networks together to create collaboration, access to professional and cultural resources, and a true unified voice in claiming the universal right to housing for all. Working with people is complex. Caring for people is complex. Although we may offer resources, for many legitimate reasons, individuals are unable or willing to accept those resources in that moment. Our role, most importantly, is to be present. The people you see outside are friends, they are family, they are relatives, they have feelings, thoughts, and most importantly, gifts. So when you see somebody outside, remember that they are that people. I'd like to introduce my colleague, Jacob Kaufman, a peer advocate with the Main Street Project, whom every day is on the front line, walking the streets, driving up and down alleys, and crossing riverbanks just to connect with people.
Wow. Thank you very much. Hello, my name is Jacob Kaufman. I'm currently a peer advocate at Main Street Project. I too grew up in the wonderful foster system, and I ran away from it because of the abuse, because of the stuff that went on with it. I ended up on Hastings. I've been here since 2000. And I love this city. My job is to go out into the community day after day and just build relationships with people. Yeah, I use a harm reduction approach to my work. And what that means is just meet people where they're at. Just go out and talk to people, see what they need. A lot of the time, the community and people who are looking from the outside in at what we do, just think that we give food, coffee, harm reduction supplies to people, but it's so much more. And I am so thankful for the amazing community we work with. These are just tools that we use, some of the tools to build relationships and get connections with people, and also to gain trust, because without the trust of the community, I wouldn't have a job. I wouldn't be able to work with them. And it's amazing. There's a lot of distrust in formal institutions, shelters, and church groups and other things, because people who are experiencing homelessness have been marginalized and not treated with the respect that they need to be treated with traditionally. So people are afraid to go there. And also a big thing is, a shelter does not feel like a permanent home for someone. And that's a big thing that we tend to forget about, is that people want a home, whatever that looks like. Let it be a bus shack, let it be an encampment, let it be sleeping under a bridge. People, it's their community. They want to feel home free. They want to feel safe. That's why we bring outreach to them. That's why we work with people. Yeah, when we go and meet people, it doesn't happen like that. We have to go back 2 or 3 times. Sometimes it takes months, weeks, years to get the connection with the community and get to know them. And the layers of trust have to be built there. And we never ever push what we think people should be doing. What I do in my job and in my life is, when I'm there for when people have figured out what they want, I'll help them take that next steps or connect them with the people that should. People have no other places to go sometimes. Shelters are full, and just so they end up sleeping in bus shacks. They end up sleeping in encampments under a bridge. It's sad, but it's a reality. And a lot of the time, it's just comes down to safety. The housing that's available to people right now across North America a lot of it is unsafe. It's infested with bugs. It's too expensive. A lot of what I'm hearing from the community is, first and foremost, they want safe, affordable housing. So that's what the community is asking for. So I don't see in this day and age why we don't give it to them. It's just what we do. My job is a peer advocate, and people's lived experience who've been there, who understand what it's like not to have a safe place, who understand what it's like to do horrible, dreadful things for money, to have horrible, dreadful things done to you so you can eat or get a shelter out of -40 weather. It allows us to connect with the people that we work with. It's important to work together, not only with all the community, everyone in the community, but also as with different organizations. We all tend to silo. In the past, it's been a lot of this place does this well, this does this. We all need to join together as one unified voice and say enough is enough. People need housing. We need to listen to them. It's very important. Throughout the pandemic, we've seen a rise in people in encampments and bus shelters. We've seen a rise of poverty and homelessness in Winnipeg that is not needed in this day and age. We need to fix it, because our brothers, sisters, fathers, daughters, sons are dying out there. We need to figure out what people want and give it to them. It's not going to be a quick process, and this isn't going to happen overnight. We have to understand that we can't rush it. It took me darn near 10 years of living in homelessness to where I got to the point where I figured out what I wanted to take those next steps. And when I found what I wanted, I went to the right people, to the people that were trying to help me. And I said, I need this. And they helped me take those next steps. I went from living in Main Street Project to their detox, to the mainstay program, which is subsidized housing. And then I went to the Jack's Hotel when it was still around and open. And after that, I saved up enough for my own rooming house, and I got a job, and I clawed. And we have to understand that it takes time. For the last 20 years, it's been stepping stones. Nothing has happened quickly. We just have to sit back and give people time. And when we give people the time, they'll figure out what's right for them, and they'll come to us. So as a community, I just ask for patience. Please have patience. When you see that person in an encampment, when you see that person on the side of the street, drunk or intoxicated, talk to them. We need to treat people like people. We are all people. We all belong to the human race. We all should be treated as such. We should all be treating everyone on an equal playing field. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk, and thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Jacob, Adrian. Thank you for sharing with us what you've experienced, what you've heard directly from those who are living unsheltered, and for emphasizing that we need to listen to the voices of those who are experiencing homelessness when we're working on solutions. And I think, we've all seen how negative opinions are formed about people who are unsheltered that are based on assumptions, and it impacts the way that they are treated. And so thank you for emphasizing the importance of engaging with people experiencing homelessness as people, as humans. And it's great to hear about how the community is responding and reaching out and building relationships to support people who are living unsheltered. It's so important to note, though, that these responses, these are emergency responses, and while they are playing an extremely important role, what they're not doing is addressing the root causes of homelessness. And so we're gonna look beyond those emergency responses now, circle back to Charlotte and Betty, because they had outlined some of those root causes, and Jacob touched on them as well, noting the need for housing. And so we'll now learn about some of the actual solutions to address those root causes so that we can move closer toward actually ending homelessness. I'm just going to see, sorry, before we go over, there is an audience comment that's been passed along to me to share. And it's just that we've actually been seeing several comments shared around people who've had similar experiences. So, thank you for sharing that with us. And we're hearing lots of comments that are just thanking the speakers for sharing, the really important messages about what's needed for systemic change and stories. So thanks for passing those along, and keep them coming.
Hey, bonjour. We looked at the who and the why and the what. And now we're going to look at some solutions that people have been able to put together, looking at all the different aspects of homelessness. And what we'd like to ask the audience is that these solutions are just baby steps that we need to take to start that movement going so that we can create the housing for our relatives who are out there. We need to to understand the different housing types that we need in the city, what is available and built to respond to the gap. And I'll be the first to admit it, we have a whole bunch of slumlords in Winnipeg. And we have a whole bunch of reasons why people get evicted and why people would rather be homeless than stay in some of these housing places. That, you know, we need more social housing. We've got Manitoba housing, we've got Winnipeg housing. And I'm sure that all of you have heard the horror stories about living in Manitoba housing. I've lived in Manitoba housing. And I remember one building I was living in, and there was 2 drug dealers in the basement of that apartment building. And there was 4 buildings in a row, and each one had dealers, drug dealers in the building. And the violence that erupted. I mean, we used to see, you know, police cars every night almost. We need to have housing that is built and operated by Indigenous organizations, choice for people. When I lived in BC from 1990 to 1998, I sat on the board of directors for Vancouver Native Housing. And I learned while I was on that board of directors that there was Native organizations throughout BC that had, you know, gotten with the federal government and built Native housing. I mean, in Vancouver, I believe there's 3 or 4 groups that provide Native housing. The one that I was with before I left, they ended up getting contracts from the city of Vancouver to manage some of the social housing projects that Vancouver had. So when I moved back to Manitoba and I was looking for Native housing, there was none, you know. Now we're starting to see a little bit, and I'm afraid that the housing where the army barracks used to be, that I don't know how much social housing they're planning on building there, but we'll have to wait and see on that. We need to have support services to assist people in maintaining a successful tenancy. When I worked for the ACT program, probably 85% of our clientele was Indigenous. And we were dealing with addictions, we were dealing with mental health and domestic violence, gang violence, and you name it. And we saw our clients, you know, we get them housing, and 2-3 months down the road, they were out because the gangs would have moved into their apartment and start dealing drugs out there or dealing girls out there. It's why our police system here in the city hasn't got a better handle on the gangs. I don't know, you know. It's affecting all of our people, and we see our women, you know, they get into a housing unit, and the next thing you know is gangs have moved in, drug dealers have moved in, the ex-boyfriend has moved back in. So we need places where our people are going to be housed, but we're also going to have security, you know, to make sure that the gangs don't move into these buildings. I was looking at that piece that I saw just recently on the Native Kikanan and the problems they're having there with gangs moving into there. And these are seniors, you know, these are somebody's mom and dad or grandmother, grandfather, you know, that they're being invaded by these people. We need to protect our people. And so if we're going to build safe, affordable housing for our people, let's make sure that we provide the services to help the people while they're in there so that they don't lose it. I know that we've come a long way, you know, in the last 20, 30 years, but we still have a long ways to go. And I'd like all of us to really come together and pick each other's brains and create this model that other cities in Canada are going to be proud to follow. You know, like Winnipeg, I know I'm proud of Winnipeg. It's been the first of so many things, you know, and I'm sure that we can be one of the first this create housing for our people, homeless, our homeless relatives, which hi.
Thank you, Charlotte. So I'd like to talk a bit about prevention. In other cities across the country and around the world, they have policies and procedures called duty to care. So how that helps is that people just can't release people into homelessness. So if you're leaving child welfare, if you're leaving the healthcare system, everyone who works in there will have a duty to care. They have the responsibility that when they're releasing someone, that they're releasing someone to a home that will help them. So that's one of the things we need to do. We also need to have a continuum of options. Part of what we've been doing in Winnipeg for a very long time is we have put all the money into crisis. So we have put a lot into shelters. So there is still a very important role for shelters, but how is it part of a continuum? How do we have crisis support, transition support, low barrier, communal housing, permanent housing? Those we need. All of us have movement in life. We don't stay where we are our whole lives. So we need to have choices and an acknowledgement of how people's lives move. We need to sit down and in a non-blaming way really do an assessment and a review of government and community organizational policies and procedures to identify what is contributing to homelessness and change them. So we need to really look into system transformation, because how things happen now is we operate a lot in silos. So someone will make up a policy or procedure and then not realize that someone else has made a different policy and procedure, but with them together, they are creating barriers to people getting out of homelessness. And this has been proven through many, many years of research that people just keep on spinning around the systems trying to get help, but they can never actually get out of being homeless. So we need to seriously sit down and look at that in a solution-oriented way, not in a way it's your fault and you need to fix it. No, we need to sit down together and work at this. And then we're working on coordinated access in the city of Winnipeg, and that's what I'm leading. So that's a federal government sponsored mandate. So all of the organizations that are working on homelessness, everyone is coming together. And how do we all ante up our mandates and our resources? And we just focus everything on the people to prevent homelessness, to divert people from homelessness, and people who are experiencing being homeless to get them out of it. So I just want to give an acknowledgement to Employment Income Assistance on Rory. The staff there have been very supportive and have been at the table and working together to with us in coordinated access to figure out how we identify barriers and how we remove them and that. So I want to acknowledge all the good hard work that people are doing out there, but we need to do a lot more of it, because really honestly being homeless is a very traumatic experience. So I really need to tell you that all of us cope with trauma in different ways depending on the supports. But one of the ways people do cope with the trauma that they're experiencing being homeless and the constant fear and the constant survival mode is they use substances to just numb themselves. So if we want people to get out of crisis and survival and to becoming thriving, included people need a safe place so that they can think about how I can contribute to the community, not where am I going to eat today or where am I going to sleep tonight. And I guess the most important thing to honor the Truth and Reconciliation Principles and the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, we need to be planning with people. We need to not be planning for people, because planning for people has shown that it never works. And it doesn't matter if people have the best intentions, it's the impact on people's lives. So we need to really move to sitting down at the table, everyone together, and working together on this. Gretch, thank you.
Thank you, Betty and Charlotte, for summarizing some of these critical longer-term solutions for ending homelessness. It's clear that these solutions are different from charitable emergency responses. Those emergency responses alone are not going to end homelessness. Yes, people who are unsheltered absolutely need access to shelters and warming centers, to food, to hygiene products, to public restrooms, but supplying these products, building shelter beds, these are band-aids, and these are efforts to manage homelessness, as you said, and we need to invest in the solutions that are going to end it. Housing is such a critical piece, and maybe we're sounding like a broken record already on that one, but you know, we're not going to end homelessness without affordable housing. And of course, it alone is not the solution. As Betty and Charlotte mentioned, the details around the type of housing, the quality of the housing, who operates it, and the supports that come with it matter greatly. But where is this housing going to come from, and why haven't we built it yet? The Right to Housing Coalition often notes that the private market does not supply low rent housing at the scale that's needed to end homelessness, and nor is that its role. Social or public housing where rents are geared to households' income, that's what's most affordable for people experiencing homelessness. And we simply cannot provide it at the scale that's needed to end homelessness without government investment. Right now in Manitoba, there's a massive shortage of this housing. We have thousands of households on a wait list for it. And you know, even conservative estimates suggest that we need at least 250 new units a year for the next 4 years to meet the need. And so that's 1,000 units. And where are we at? Well, over the course of the first 4 years after our current provincial government was elected, it committed funding to create only 11 new social housing units. So we're clearly not moving anywhere close to fast enough. And so if we're going to end homelessness, we must ask all levels of government to do more. Our federal government launched a 10-year national housing strategy in 2017, putting $40 billion on the table for that. But getting those dollars here in Manitoba requires partnership, and it requires cost matching from our provincial and municipal governments. So we need that political will for this to happen. And you can help us build that by urging our governments to take the action that's needed. And so I'm going to turn it over to Angelina Pelletier now from Nidinaway. She is going to identify some concrete actions that you can take right now.
Thanks, Kirsten. And thank you to Charlotte and Betty and Adrian and Jacob for your contributions to this evening's conversation around ending homelessness. So my name is Angelina Pelletier, and I'm speaking to you today from Treaty 1. I'm a descendant of the Red River Métis community and currently employed at Nidinaway as a systems navigator and youth advocate. I just wanted to echo what my friend Charlotte mentioned earlier. With youth experiencing homelessness, often, being connected with the child and family welfare system. And that's something that we've all understood, is that youth homelessness leads to adult homelessness. And Kirsten mentioned some good tangible steps that we can take As individuals, you and I, our next door neighbors, our community, there are things that we can do to put the right folks to task. So I just wanted to outline some tangible steps that can be taken to transform these systems that we're working within and to help mobilize solutions. So one of the first steps that we can do is engage with the province. So that means sending an email to the Premier and the Minister of Families and asking them to help end homelessness, which means contributing more social housing. So adding at least 300 units of new social housing each year to address the local need, while also preserving existing social housing and prioritizing Indigenous-led housing initiatives. We will be sending a bit of some materials tomorrow after the session wraps up with some links to all the websites that you can check out with more information. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out to any of us to ask for more information. So that is one of the steps. There's also another thing that we can do or ask for when we're reaching out to the province, and that's to ask for increased EIA rates that reflect, current market prices. These EIA rates haven't changed in decades, but we are seeing everything else is costing a lot more, and it's not accessible, and it's not meeting basic needs for our community members. Another step that we can take is to engage the federal government. So that means writing to your MP and the Minister of Families and Children and Social Development to voice your support for some campaigns that are going on. One of them is the Recovery for All campaign, and you can find out more on their website. I think Michael has it here on the shared screen. It also includes a call for an urban, rural, and northern Indigenous housing strategy, which is designed by and for Indigenous people. We can also engage the city. In the city of Winnipeg, I think we all kind of know some of our community counselors. Michael has the list up here. Reach out, ask questions, engage with those folks that are in those positions to make some change. Something you can ask your city councilors is to use its policy levers and tools, including zoning, permitting, and land sale dispersal practices to facilitate Indigenous-led and rent-geared to income housing initiatives that can help to end homelessness. And lastly, just to kind of wrap it up, is just to engage people as people, and to really center the ways that we engage with others as we're all connected some way or another. There is the idea of interconnectedness, which reflects that we're all aware that we're all connected in the universe. It also reinforces that everyone and everything has a purpose and is worthy of respect and compassion. We've talked about, some of the Band-Aid solutions that we've been experiencing so far, that we've been reverting to, but these are responses at the end of the day, and these aren't solutions. So I really think it's important to, kind of echoing what everyone said here tonight, treat people nicely, be safe, be kind, have a good heart. I think, embodying the 7 teachings that I hope everyone knows is a great way to live, and just having compassion for your fellow neighbor, seeing yourself in others, and just caring for folks and caring for our community. And I know Winnipeg, we all have really big hearts, friendly Manitoba. I think that we can make a huge impact if we just kind of exercise some of these really tangible steps.
Thank you, Angelina, for calling us all to action. Before we let everybody go, I'll read out one more comment here saying thanks to you all for your important work. Housing is indeed a human right. Governments are responsible to ensure this right is upheld. They must commit to maintaining and building more publicly owned housing. We should accept nothing less. So yes, please everybody go and support these campaigns however you can. If you want to get involved with the Right to Housing or Make Poverty History Manitoba coalitions, you can reply. There's going to be a follow-up email that you'll receive tomorrow, and you can reply that way and let us know. And you'll also find a link to this recording in that email. So yeah, tonight, we explored questions around why people are experiencing homelessness, what's being done about it, what needs to be done, and now you have some concrete actions you can take to help us end homelessness. Before you go, we've posted in the chat, I think a quick 1-minute event evaluation. If you can fill that out, it'll really help us to better plan future events. And I just want to say thanks to all of our speakers for sharing their wisdom with us this evening, and really to all of you who took the time out of your evening to join us. Have a great night.